The mind is essentially the ego and is responsible for creating a sense of separation and individuality. By quieting the mind through meditation and self inquiry, one can transcend the ego and experience the unity of the self with the Absolute. There is the mind, the space where the phenomenon of minding is happening. And then there is simply what we recognize as the mind, which is the collection of thoughts. Here, Ramana is talking about mind as in the collection of thoughts and our identification with it, which gives rise to a fictitious non-entity called the ego. Ego isn't real. If you try to search for just the ego, you will not find it. You cannot isolate the ego from the mind. It is an identification that sticks everything together. But just like a perfect glue, it disappears. Everything is stuck. Nothing is independent. But you cannot see what is sticking it. That's the ego. How does this happen? What is the process through which a pure, limitless entity, the mind, consciousness, the self, how does it become entangled in itself to create the ego? The entanglement is so real for us as human beings that we have to create an external entity called the God to attribute to the process of creation, which is nothing but the sticking together of things by the ego. If the ego dissolves, the nature of reality shifts immediately. From being a physical place, the world simply becomes a dream. There is no need for things to be physical for them to exist. They can exist purely in the mental plane. They can exist just as a thought. It is our identification with that part of the mind that we recognize as us, which is our individuality. What we identify as our life, that gives this sensation of physicality. It is so real as an experience to us when we experience our body, when we experience things using the body. The ego has done its job so completely that we forget altogether about the mind, about the realm we are occupying, about the self, about the nature of reality itself. We are stuck in a feeling of physicality that we have to solve. That is why we need the help of an external entity. We cannot see the process through which the very same thought that passes through the mind without any problem eventually takes hold of you, drags you along with it, makes you forget your own true nature. The process is beautiful. The process is very innocent. There is nobody creating the ego. This is very important to understand. There is no need for a creator. If you can understand the process of the creation of the ego, you will understand the process of creation in its entirety. Because it is the ego that identifies with the manifested phenomenon of the mind and calls it reality. Without the ego, it is just a dream. You don't ask who is creating your dreams. You know there is no creator. That's why you call it a dream. It is just happening. But you wake up in the morning, you are still in the dream. It's the same dream. You are dreaming with a little more lucidity. You are a lot more attached and involved in this dream. Other than that, there is no separation whatsoever. And yet, for you, it feels physical. It feels real. What is the process that changes a thought into a thing? An idea into something real. That is the process through which the ego takes birth. Because when a thought is just a thought, there is no ego. When a thought becomes a thing, there is ego. What turns a thought into a thing is that feeling of false individuality, which we recognize as ego. There's no direct way of explaining this because we don't have the necessary language to explain the process of creation, because language comes later. We have created language after the world is accepted as real. We never doubt the world while creating language. But in trying to understand the nature and the process of creation, you have to doubt creation. And language is useless when used directly. So the best way to understand it is through some form of analogy. Now imagine you're just sitting amidst of nature, all alone, and there is a gentle breeze. Initially, it is so gentle that you're not even thinking about it. You're just sitting there admiring nature. You're blissful. You are settled. And then slowly, the breeze intensifies. You can feel it more. So much so that now it is a part of the narrative of that moment. It is real. One moment, it was just in the background. You were not even bothered about it. Next moment, you are actually thinking about it. But again, once in a while, you are still free to be in that moment and experience everything that you're experiencing. Then it intensifies more and more. There's a storm brewing. It intensifies to a point, it starts shaking things. It starts moving things. To a point where you have to hold on to something just to sit. You are being moved. In your physical definition of the word, only something physical can move another physical object. A thought cannot push things around. So you know this wind is not a thought. It is something real. But just a few moments ago, it was there and you did not even notice it. You did not care about the process through which this gentle breeze was becoming a wind, and then to a point where it's pushing things around without any external entity, without someone wanting it to happen, without someone creating this invisible hand that can touch and move you. The very process of addition, movement, momentum has changed something simple and easy to accommodate by its very nature into something you have to fight against. Now you have to choose. You cannot simply sit there and enjoy nature. To be able to do that, you have to fight. You have to struggle to survive. And then you have to enjoy the scenery. This continues to intensify, and if you don't do something, if you don't alter the environment, if you simply decide to sit there, the wind can intensify to a point where it can completely put you out of the context where you are, what you're experiencing. It can totally remove from the scene of action. You have the desire to connect with life. You have the desire to enjoy the moment. But you are struggling to even be in one place. You are constantly being thrown around. You don't even know where you are. You don't even know where you're going to be the next moment. Your entire focus and attention has shifted towards survival. Enjoying the landscape around is the least important thing now. At that moment, if you become aware of who you are, you will find something. You will identify with it. You will call it you, but that will only be your ego. The ego whose job is to fight. The only thing the ego knows is how to fight. Because ego is created through the process of fighting thoughts. So much so that it has become your identity. You wake up in the morning, you identify with something. You start talking to yourself. You start having a conversation. And then you start doing things. You like certain things. You don't like certain things. Throughout the day, you are interacting with yourself. But who are you actually interacting with? Are you interacting with yourself? Or are you interacting with this imaginary entity that was created through a process.